Hi, friends. I've only got 10 minutes, but I keep getting downloads in the middle of the night about things I want to talk about. Kind of a continuum of what I shared on the last video. So I'll see which way I'm directed here. Yeah. So I want to say a couple of things. One is, I was addressing like a sterileness or like a more rigid way of what I see in design. And that's just because I have like my clients are usually in the demographic of like fifth or sixth homes, and usually more on like the if you're hiring a designer, you're usually on the higher end side, and you're usually but like concerned about how things look and what they look like to other people and all of that. So I guess what I'm sensitive to, what I'm speaking to, a lot of things I bump into at work. And I realize that most people are dealing with not that problem. Probably the biggest challenge for people that are actually living in homes and having children and living their lives is a struggle with organization, with cleanliness, with keeping up with everything, right? So that's like a whole other like hoarding conversation and the psychology of that. And that is certainly one that I'll start to pick at. But it's a bigger topic. But I really want to kind of get to this core, this foundational element of how things feel. And so like the design process is is an embodiment of a creation process, which is all of life, right? So we are all designing our lives unconsciously or consciously, right? And so part of creating a conscious creation, part of being a co-creative element and participant in creating something that you want, is looking at emotionality and feelings, right? So the things that I focus on a lot are, as a designer, I'm a little unusual because I'm not I like this style or this material, or the thing that made me fall in love with architecture was like when I really fell in love with it was when I studied architectural history, and you get this zoomed out social storyline of the origins behind each design. So you have like something like Bauhaus movement, which is the beginning of the modern movement. So you can look at modern and say that's too cold, that's too sterile, that's too industrial, too commonplace, and say that's not for me. But the modern movement was derived from a pushback against like this kind of bourgeois and class division, right? And so for me, so then I fall in love, right, with that minimalism, with that starkness, with that desire to create accessibility for all people, right? And then you have like these creative pockets of the timeline of cultural evolution, where you have like a lot of maybe wealth, and you get this really intense development of the arts and sculpture and really ornate things. You have this like influx of like opioid use and like this kind of art nouveau in combination with this kind of gilded age, right? So like basically behind all things is this social intention, or it's this just an intentional expression. And there's no right or wrong way to do things. There's, am I moving in this direction of intention? And intentionality is really important. And so you might say, well, what is my intention, and where do I even start to look for that? And what does that mean in terms of design? And one of the things that I started doing for myself, and now it's become a process, but it started as an exercise in how I design my life, right? And then how I design my life is then directly influencing my intentionality around how I design for my home, or or for my clients, right? Their intention of how they're going to live their lives is what drives me into the design process. And then obviously I start to observe and or get in the framework of what they're drawn to and why, right? And then I try to create like a material translation for that that makes sense for the time, that makes sense for the budget, that makes sense for their lifestyle, and and that picks up the qualities of the underlying factors of what they're drawn to. And so one of the methods that I started to track this and Brené Brown actually has this exercise in one of her books, which came much later. It's a method that people have used. Basically, you look back on your life and you think about the times that you were happiest in your life, these moments that you have happiness in your life, or joy, or expanded heart energy. Like I get this sense in my feeling at certain moments where I'm like, this is a yes for me, right? For me, it's when I have children in my home, and when I'm hosting a dinner party, or just, yeah, when there's lots of little kids around, or it's when I'm in community and we're holding authentic space for each other, right? So one of the things that I tracked looking back on my life and times that I was happiest, there was an element of like a social kind of tribe, like, like in college. It's a very trying time, but it's also one of the more playful, adventurous, fun, expansive times. And thinking back about like, there were always dynamics of different people. It wasn't just like three people in one space. It was like this engagement of high community, right? And developing intimate relationships with multiple people and having that sense of like community. So for me, I was able to track what's really important to me. It's prioritizing the honor of raising humans in a like, with lots of spectrums of ages, and just this really safe organic place for them to play and explore, where there's not a lot of stress around the home being a certain way, or worrying about the home being a certain way, right? So I designed my life very much in that way, right? Or around community, I design, or I choose a space, or I design my life so that community can be an easy influx into my space, right? Whether I have family living on property or friends living on property and us sharing a space, or whether I'm inviting people over on the weekends, and creating that sense of community. And so that's how I've designed my life. And then my home is a reflection of that. So I think, as a tactic, thinking about what are the times in my life that I was happy and what did that look like, right? And or if you're about to remodel a home, I was talking to this designer, Danielle, and she had been working with someone, and they had this process where they would have a client stand in their kitchen and close their eyes and say, like, you're standing in your kitchen and it's like really a wonderful day. Like, what's happening? What's happening? Like, what's the lighting in the room? What's the colors that you see? What's happening? Like, your kids are there, your friends are there, your partner is there, whatever it is. So like, describe the feeling and describe what's happening with that feeling, right? And so you can start to track that. Like I was just I've been helping a friend like pick out a sofa, and it says this is, it's a big investment for a lot of people, including, me, like, and she's like, looking at this one, and then she's like, oh, but I can't have like 8 people sitting comfortably on this couch, so I should get a different one. And so it was like, okay, well, what do you use your couch? Well, me and my son, we cuddle up on the couch, and I always fall asleep. And how often do you have like 8 people in your living room? Well, like never. And it's not that she, and she wants to move towards maybe being able to see 8 people, but they don't all need to be able to lay back and put up their feet, while she's having a party with 8 people. So, but then she's listening to someone else say, well, it's not practical to get this type of sofa because you can't seat as many people. And I'm going, but what are you doing every day? You're doing this thing, and this thing is makes much more sense for your life, which is just kind of tying into this concept that I was talking about last time, where it's really just getting clear about your life, your intentionality, and like what supports that on a day-to-day basis, like realistically. And a lot of that is also for normal people having a place to put things, not overbuying, right? Not over consuming and getting overwhelmed with things and then everything piling up. Um, for me, I'm classified diagnosed ADD. So for me, like keeping things as minimal as possible helps me function. Like if I'm in a cluttered space, I just shut down. I just totally go to sleep. I literally go to sleep. And I noticed that because that was what my home environment was growing up. And so I diverged from that for my own mental functionality. You're also dealing with, a lot of the things that you're dealing with are patterns from your family. They're maybe lineage patterns. They have certain survival, like the mechanism of nesting out of balance, or like an energy of lack can turn into like a hoarding situation, right? And so that can really like shut your system down. And the hoarding can come back, into lineages and genetic, like epigenetic expressions, based on depression era culture, or so on and so forth. So just getting back to this feeling quality. And I think this is the thing that I've resisted about being called an interior designer. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love, like, one of my favorite things to do on the planet is to do a whole new furniture layout and put those boards together and get like all new pieces and do that for clients. Like, it's literally one of my favorite things to do. So I'm not bashing that in any way. And it's largely how I make a living. It's part of how I make a living.